Hello, my name is Philip Camella, and today we're going to have a conversation beyond science and religion.
Breaking new ground in thinking, exploring the outer limits of what we know about the world and ourselves, unhindered by common beliefs and perceptions. This is Conversations Beyond Science and Religion, taking on subjects from the Big Bang, the multiverse, and evolution to the supernatural and the new rising consciousness. This is where scientists, philosophers, New Agers, and spiritualists come together to discuss where this world may be heading. Now here's your host, lawyer, philosopher, and the author of The Collapse of Materialism, Philip Camella.
Now, I started doing this show in about 2012 with the goal of taking an open-minded and rational look at ideas and theories that went beyond our normal way of looking at things. Science and religion currently define the normal and accepted way of looking at things. The ideas coming from these two fields feel comfortable, though few people actually know them, much less understand them. And that is the ideas coming from science and religion. We tend to take these ideas on faith. Ideas that go beyond science and religion are in many instances considered to be outliers, strange, woo-woo, the product of quacks, or any number of other sort of intellectual insults. But I have found in my own research and from reading countless books on the topic that when we turn the inquiry, our critical rationality against the big accepted ideas, such as, for example, the Big Bang or dark matter, that these ideas themselves become suspicious. So the idea here is to apply our rationality against new ideas, but to also keep in the back of our mind that science and religion themselves are based upon ideas that don't always hold water. I've been fortunate to have many of the world's cutting-edge thinkers on this show. And for those who have listened, I hope in some ways that your view of the world has been expanded after taking sort of an extended sabbatical from the show and thinking that it was time to shut it down. My producer made the point to me that many of the topics I've covered in the show are not as radical as they were 7 years ago. To me, this tends to support the truth of an underlying theme to virtually all of the open-minded thinkers, philosophers, scientists over time, and that is that the movement of history is towards open-mindedness, consciousness raising, not closed-mindedness. If the current ideas in religion do not fully contain the everlasting truth, then the mind, I think, will stretch beyond these fields until it eventually reaches the truth. So this is what I hope to be a new series of updated shows. Are all the ideas on the show true? Not necessarily. Is this zone free of woo-woo, new age, or quack thinking? Probably not. Do some ideas consist of more wishful thinking than provable theory? Probably. But unless we expose ourselves to these theories, we will never know the truth. So today we're going to talk about a rich and interesting topic with one of its leading investigators. And the topic is crop circles. And I've entitled this show, The Enigma of Crop Circles. My guest today is Lucy Pringle, who is kind enough to be joining us from the UK. Now, crop circles to me are very simple. Either they are signs of some intelligent, invisible force in the universe, or they are simply fake. If you've never seen a crop circle, I suggest that you take your phone and Google crop circles. They consist of intricate patterns carved into farm fields, mostly in the countryside of England, but in fact, as Lucy shows in her new book, crop circles have been reported around the world, including in the US. Now, Lucy is one of the world's leading crop circle photographers and researchers. Her photos have been used worldwide on TV, films, books, and magazines. She is recognized as an international expert on crop circles and has been a guest on the BBC and Meridian TV and the BBC World Service, and has also appeared on William Gazecki's Crop Circles, Quest for Truth, as well as the Discovery, Learning, and History channels. She's author of the book called Crop Circles, The Greatest Mystery of Modern Times. She's currently working on a medical research team investigating the temporary relief of Parkinson's disease. And she's also, and this is what brings us to today, she's also the author of the new book in front of me. It's called The Energies of Crop Circles, The Science and Power of a Mysterious Intelligence. Lucy, thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, and I'm delighted to be here.
Well, it's nice that you have taken some of your time out. I know that as part of your research, you're sort of on call. Is that correct? That at any time you might get a report of a crop circle? Is that correct?
Well, exactly. Yes, I do. I get a first-hand report from a website, friends of mine who run the oldest website, the Crop Circle Connector, and they get in touch with me right away.
So let's start a little bit in the background here, which is, how did you get interested in crop circles?
Well, I think I've always been interested in the unexplained right from the time I was a child, when I saw wonderful pictures in a book of coloured birds, beautifully coloured birds. And I was in the nursery at that time, and I asked my nurse, my nanny, what about these birds? I couldn't read at the time, so I must have been very young, because I read quite early. And she said, oh, those are birds of paradise. And I said, oh, how lovely. Where's paradise? And she didn't know. And this was quite a shock to me. And so I asked my governess. She didn't know. And we were brought up in rather a Victorian sort of way. We were allowed down to see our parents every evening. And that was quite a daunting time of day for us, my sister and I. One evening, I summoned up enough courage to ask the parents, where was paradise? And they didn't know. Now, that was such a shock, because all adults were supposed to know everything. Yeah. And I was just a child. And so I decided that when I grew up, I would find paradise and I'd take everybody there.
Oh,
well, I think sometimes you find paradise momentarily, but it's sort of very mercurial, and it disappears again. And I think my next one was Loch Ness Monster. Then my next one was Einstein's theory of relativity, which I never fully understood. Then I came across infinity. Now, that was a big blow to me. I couldn't believe that infinity wasn't finite at some very distant point. And then, of course, the crop circles arrived, and that was just ghastly. I couldn't find the explanation to that. That almost drove me round the bend. And as time progressed and I did my research and I met lots of people, and I came to the conclusion that certain things, there's no explanation for them at all. They are ineffable. So I decided, I felt quite comfortable with them now that we will never get all the answers, and infinity doesn't matter anymore, and all the other things that bothered me don't matter anymore. I've accepted that certain ones have to be beyond the wit of man, beyond our current knowledge or understanding, and we may never find the answer, and that's fine.
Well, one of my themes of this show, of today's show, is sort of exactly that. We may not ever find out what the origin source of crop circles are, but we could say the same thing about the universe at large.
Yes, there's so much to learn, isn't there?
It's really not much different than the way we confront the mystery of existence without overstating it. But let's do something here for a second to make sure we give the listeners some context. What are crop circles?
Well, they're depressions in the field, and what is particularly striking about them is the neat cut-off point between the standing crop and the fallen crop. and you get all sorts of different patterns inside these circular or sometimes triangular events. I came in when my two sons had left home, and suddenly, instead of looking after people, you suddenly find that, this is what they call the empty nest syndrome.
Yeah.
And I realized I had time for myself. And as I mentioned, I've always been interested in the unexplained. I was living in Hampshire at the time and still am. And the some of the recent ones, because they go back a long, long way into the dim and distant past, they were happening all around me. And I became fascinated, and I was asked to become a founder member of the first academic society, because one or two people thought, well, now this is such a subject now that really needs proper intellectual examination. And I came in as a dowser or a diviner, and which I still do as well. And that was how I joined the society, and there were scientists and there were all sorts of different people from different fields of expertise.
Well, the book that you just published, The Energies of Crop Circles, which I'm going to say has some amazing photographs of crop circles, and for those who think that crop circles are made by wayward folks with lawnmowers or bar stools or planks, whatever the theory is, and look at some of these photographs and try to rationally conclude that the intricate designs in these fields is made by a bunch of sort of delinquents or a bunch of hoaxers spending their evenings drawing intricate designs in farm fields. So the photographs are unbelievable, which is why I think this is one area where pictures speak 1,000 words. Just saying the word crop circle doesn't mean much until you see the actual designs and the intricacy of how these things are put together. Now, the scientific view of these, and we might as well draw the dichotomy here because I think this is important. There's an article in Scientific American that you may or may not have seen because it's probably it's been reported elsewhere. It's from August 2002, as I said, and it's called Crop Circle Confession by this guy, Matt Ridley, who basically confesses that he has made some crop circles. And so I think that the scientific community reads an article like this. It's very similar to the kinds of things that are done in the paranormal. We have folks exposing some hoaxers, and all of a sudden, everything is considered to be a hoax. Or, all accounts of the paranormal are all considered to be fraudulent because there's one person that actually did generate a hoax. So I'd like to have you address this question of how you deal with folks who think it's all a hoax.
Well, there are definitely man-made ones, and it was Matthew Williams who made the circle, and he still makes circles. But if anybody would like to go onto my website and go into my photographs of this year, I've put up one which somebody called Dean Hine, I think it is, he made, and you'll be able to compare. I've put it up because I wanted people to be able to compare the difference between the man-made and the genuine. What is particularly interesting is that many of the press, they pontificate, and they've never even been into a circle. And they don't know anything about it, but they just like it. It's sort of, I don't know what it is exactly. It's as though there's some force behind this, some who are telling them, some agency or something, that they have got to ridicule this phenomenon. And give the impression to the public that they are all man-made. Well, I know very well they're not, but what are the press frightened of? Are they being threatened by the powers that be? Are they frightened of this phenomenon? What is it that they feel so reluctant to actually tell the truth on both sides? And I sent up a scientific paper a couple of years ago. None of the people I sent it up to in the press wanted to know about it. It's not on their agenda. They have to put out endless stories about man-made ones. And so this is where you are.
Well, I think that it's interesting, and I thought that was very well put, Lucy, because in my thinking on this topic here, the topic being experiences, phenomena that stretch our understanding of the world, that a lot of it is sociological or psychological as opposed to fact-based. A lot of folks, and I think we're seeing this all over the place with things like the multiverse, Darwin's theory of evolution. I could go on and on with the inflationary Big Bang, things that people believe must be true to be sane, even though they don't understand them. And so things that contradict those scientific theories, the materialistic theories, must be wrong, despite the evidence. And so I really think there's a certain amount of sociological theory or peer pressure here.
I can tell you one example, which was really, really quite striking. I don't know if I can name, you named one of the papers or something in America. I don't know if I can name this, but you can cut it out if you don't want it. It was the National Geographic. And now that is, the headquarters are in America.
Right.
Well, I had done one interview with the National Geographic many years ago, and I'd said at the time, who else are you interviewing? Because if they interview the hoaxers, then they give the hoaxers prime time. So they said, oh, nobody else but you, Lucy. And so I did the interview, but they asked me very superficial questions and very trite questions. I couldn't get over it. This is supposed to be a serious magazine and or program. And I said to them afterwards, I wasn't really happy with that. And then a crop circle, which was not a very brilliant one, appeared close by. And I rang through to the producer and I said, has this got anything to do with you? And she said, yes, we've got the farmer to allow somebody to make it. So I said, that is absolutely against our agreement in every way.
Yeah.
And she said, oh, don't worry, Lucy. You'll be quite happy when you see the video, the program. When I saw the program, and I was given half a minute, and the man-made people, the hoaxers, were given 2.5 minutes.
Yeah. So
I wrote a scathing article and put it up on my website.
Yeah.
And the next thing that happened with them, several of us were asked to take part in an experiment or be an interview. And I think other people had bad experiences, so we all said no. Well, a friend of mine who lives in Holland, he was walking past Silbury Hill one night, because they nearly all appear at night, and he saw lights across the road by West Kennet Longbarrow. So he walked up and he found the producer, and he said, oh, what's happening? And she said, oh, we're making something. Men are making a circle for the National Geographic. So my friend said, oh, that's interesting. So he went over to where these men were with their boards and things. And when he got there, he was absolutely amazed, because what they were doing was simply walking round a circle that had appeared 2 weeks before. Now, the way that film was shot, the whole world thought those men had made it. I mean, how shameful can you get?
Yeah. That's, what is going on there, and we're of the same mind, is that it's as if you're part of the establishment. Now I'm going to say something radical here. If you're part of the establishment, it's okay to mislead people because you're misleading them for something considered to be a good cause, and that cause being science. And unfortunately, our current scientific worldview is mindless and purposeless. And therefore, anything that suggests the presence of an intelligence must therefore be quackery or intelligent design or creationism. And then, of course, we'll go to the most wild, they use the most wild explanations, such as Bigfoot did it, or some flying saucer did it, which is just a way of ridiculing the authors or the investigators, and also it doesn't advance the discussion. Now, I'm going to say a couple of things here that are more positive here. I did my own research, and just a couple things first. I think it's healthier to approach something like crop circles, and you could say the same thing about the paranormal. I don't want to talk about UFOs or Bigfoot right now because I put those in a little different category. But what you can do is you can assume that crop circles are real, that they're not human-made, and that therefore there's some mystery to them. Or you could just assume that they're all fake. Okay, just by hypothesis. And if you assume that they're real, that there is some other force working in the cosmos, I think you reach a richer view of the world. To assume that they're all fake, I think you have to be extremely closed-minded, pessimistic, and also afraid of mystery. You also, and one last thing, you have to ignore the evidence. And I did call up your website, and I think I have your website here. You can give it to the listener, Lucy. Why don't you give it to the listener while we're on the phone? It's
lucypringle.co.uk.
Right. Okay. So the point being, it's cropcircles.lucypringle.co.uk. And the point is that for the listener, you could call up her photographs during the show or after the show, and exactly what we've been talking about is in front of you, which is that these crop circles, particularly some of them are works of art. They're not somebody with a lawnmower, a giant lawnmower, sort of out of control. Because at last I looked, there weren't a lot of people who could make intricate designs following mathematical symmetry using a lawnmower. But be that as it may, I think the open-minded investigation is to keep the options open. Now, the good news is that I did do some research on this, and I'm just going to read one quote this is an academic online service called The Conversation, and this is what they say. They say, despite claims by circle makers that they are human-made, the sheer size and complexity of the circles belies a 100% human-made explanation. According to researchers at the conference, hoaxers, when questioned about how they were able to make 80 or so perfectly round circles without breaking or snapping cereal stalks, are unable to produce the patterns and ignore the researchers' questions. Okay, so this is a scientific blog online basically saying what you're saying.
Well, exactly. We've had people saying, oh, we can do this, and we asked them to do it, and they turned out they couldn't.
Right.
I just read you something about a formation that appeared last year at a place called Martinsell Hill in Wiltshire. And a friend of mine is a mathematician and a geometer, and he has been drawing up the circles after they've appeared. And this particular one took him 3 days to draw up. And he wrote, I've been drawing the circles now for nearly 30 years, and I was astonished by the skill and precision embodied in Martinsell Hill. It is, in my view, one of the top 10, maybe 5 formations we have received. It contains 28 pentagrams, and 140 precisely formed isosceles triangles, each with a prime angle of 36 degrees, which automatically generates the golden section. Any suggestion that this meticulous and majestic crop formation might be man-made is bizarre to the point of lunacy.
Yes, and that, I think that's another very good way to put it. But let's move. Well, it's nice that some people who are rational, intelligent, which hopefully includes the two of us, are being open-minded about these crop circles. I mean, I did not know much about them, and your book, which was sent to me, really opened my eyes. And as I said before, it was really the photographs that did it for me. But the one point that really remains mysterious, that may lend some evidence for how they arise, is in your book. There you summarize the eyewitness accounts of the formation of crop circles. In fact, the eyewitness accounts are very scant. Right? No one's ever photographed or videoed a crop circle being made. Right?
No, they haven't, because I don't think they've ever thought one's going to happen.
Yeah, that's a good point. Unless you have
This takes
that's a good point.
Surprise.
That's a good point. Well, and to me that says something. And again, this is in Lucy's book. She's got an appendix which summarizes the eyewitness accounts, and I would call them sketchy, but to me that doesn't answer the question, because I think you could say the same thing about your bird of paradise, for example, which is, where did the colorful bird of paradise come from? And actually, you could say the same thing about the world at large. I mean, I actually analogize crop circles to constellations in the sky.
Well, I can assure you, they got an awful lot to do with the heavens and the cosmos, as is written by scientist James Young. And I think not all scientists are blinkered or difficult. James is retired, and he is now, having retired, he can put down things that he thinks without necessarily, he's a mainstream scientist, an absolutely first-class mainstream scientist, but he can now think outside the box without the fear of scorn from his peer reviews and things. He's now free to think as he wants, so he thinks outside the box, and it's well worth reading some of his comments at the end of each of my chapters, because they put into scientific language what I have actually been talking about. I mean, this is a scientific subject. Please don't think otherwise. It's a beautiful subject. It's an artistic subject, and as somebody said, it's probably the best form of art that's appeared in the last 2 centuries. But at the same time, in order to make this subject credible, I realized I had to go onto the scientific side, because people won't pay any attention unless there's science to it.
Well, I think that James Lyons, his comments are good, and I do think that a scientific explanation would be helpful. To me, we often misuse the word scientific explanation. What we really mean by that term is a logical, rational explanation, because in many instances, what we call, and this is just my own opinion here, but what we call a scientific explanation is an explanation within the paradigm of current materialistic modern science. So modern science always wants some kind of force field, some kind of particle, some kind of physical force to create anything. When our current scientific paradigm is asked the question about how design is possible, that's where things start falling apart for them. And that is, to me, the biggest sort of message from the new era here is that I do think that more and more people are asking the question. Science is great, but they can't explain design. And that goes all the way from,
Well, James can. James can.
Yeah.
And he's way ahead of his time.
Yeah.
And he works with a lot of people who are also retired. They work together, they collaborate, and they're doing absolutely fantastic work.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I see I think it was his comment, this thing about the oneness in cosmic consciousness, the chapter of the book. And I think that was, that was your chapter. And then maybe he commented upon that, because that kind of, I personally think, I personally think that we need to expand what we call science to include things like cosmic consciousness or intelligence or the mind and all this whole thing. This is what my whole sort of makeup is to expand science to include an intelligent element that's not part of what is known as intelligent design.
I think maybe we'll come round to it. At the moment, that's regarded as, even though you can prove that certain things are happening, it's still known as soft science, if you like.
Yeah.
And so that hasn't actually become what you might say is established mainstream, but I think it will do. I think people's thoughts are starting to open and expand, and I feel encouraged when there are people like James around and other people who are doing a tremendous amount of work on the universe. And of course, he links up crop circles to the universe.
Right.
And it's exciting stuff. It really is. And well, as regards my research, as I think you mentioned, I'm looking into investigating the temporary relief of Parkinson's.
Right.
And if our research can in any way help mainstream science in this most unfortunate condition, then I feel that will be testament to the crop circles alone. And I'm working with somebody called Paul Gerry, who's an advanced clinical physiologist from Devon and Exeter Hospital, bringing in mainstream science, and we're getting extraordinary results from the tremor tests, from the writing tests, handwriting tests, before and after. We do 2 control tests, one before and one after, and the test in the actual crop circle. All 3 are identical, and then they can be analyzed, and they can be examined and analyzed, and we can produce the results. And last summer, we didn't have time, which I didn't have time to put in the book. We were testing the eye movements of Parkinson's as against normal people. And they have what is something called a saccadic eye movement, which means that if they're following a moving object, such as a pendulum, their eye movement is all jumpy and jagged, whereas ours is a very smooth curve. Well, when we went into the crop circle, we repeated the test, and the results afterwards for the Parkinson's sufferer was absolutely dramatic. It was as though she didn't have Parkinson's, whereas perfectly obvious from the first control test that she did.
Yeah, I think that, and I want to talk about the sort of the healing benefits in a second here. I want to read one quote from your book to close off our point about this whole paradigm issue and James Lyons. And your quote is, "It is clearly being revealed that the dominant paradigm will in due course be seen to be holistic, implying the connectivity of everything. The interaction of our intent with the cosmos is already reestablishing itself as a major factor in our overall understanding of how the universe functions." Okay, so this is from your own book, and my point being here that using crop circles as an example, it is revealing the need to expand our existing paradigm for how we understand the world, and so that's, to me, what makes it interesting and makes it sort of something that cannot be ignored. Now, going to the Parkinson's, this is a very sort of an interesting, and I would call this really dramatic or almost radical sort of finding that you have case studies in your book about how indeed folks who go into crop circles are in some cases healed. I'd like to have you talk just a little bit about how you discovered this, and then you could talk a little bit more about the Parkinson's, which is very interesting. But how did you come upon learning the health benefits of the crop circles?
All these things happen by chance, you know, and yet you say to yourself, what is coincidence? No, I don't think coincidence exists. I think these are actually meant to happen.
Yes.
Well, a friend of mine had Parkinson's, in fact still has. And in 1996, I went to visit her and we were chatting about the crop circles and my work. And she said, oh, I'd love to go into a crop circle. And I said, well, I really can't take you because as well as feeling wonderful, people actually can feel really very ill. And I said, you're not well, so I really can't take you. And she begged and pleaded. And I said, well, all right, I'll tell you what I do. Next summer, if I can find a really almost entirely beneficial one, I'll let you know. Well, one appeared called the Taurus Knot in July 1997. And I went down from Hampshire. I went down every day for a week, and I went into this circle for a week every day, and I felt fine. And I stood at the edge of the field. The farmer it was open for visitors, and I gathered information from everybody who came out. Incidentally, I've got the largest database of reports of what happens to people inside the circle or in the vicinity of circles, or even what happens to them when they see them on the screen, because what is happening, they're giving off vibrations, just like Pythagoras taught us, music and number, because they're shaped with, the geometry gives off resonances, energies, frequencies. So this was what is happening. So I got over 800 reports, and I'm aiming for 1,000. Getting there slowly. Anyway, I said to Mary, I think this is the crop circle for you. And she went in with a friend, and she told me that they sat in the center for not very long, 25, 30 minutes. But mind you, as you lose time, she may have sat there for much longer. So I don't know. I wasn't there. But anyhow, she stopped shaking. And she stopped shaking not just for a few minutes, few seconds, a few minutes. She stopped shaking for 24 hours. Now, that doesn't happen when you've got Parkinson's. It just simply doesn't happen. And she then it reverted. The shaking came back. But she also she had this wonderful feeling of peace and well-being, which lasted a long time, in noticeable feeling of peace and well-being. So that set me on my track to investigate Parkinson's. And we were using a diagnostic machine, which Professor William Tiller at Stanford University said was the best diagnostic machine available. And we were testing people by putting on electrodes and measuring their frequencies, and we found that one time, this is when the technology improves and our methodology improved too. You know, it's a process of evolution, and we found one year when the technology had improved sufficiently that Parkinson's sufferers was spiking. The graph was showing they were spiking in the gamma level of brain activity. Well, gamma level is between, I think it's 34 to 72 hertz per second. So I didn't know anything about gamma. I know a certain amount about delta, theta, beta, alpha, beta, but I knew nothing about gamma. So I read copiously on the internet, and I found a little paragraph in one article saying in the gamma state of brain activity, the brain naturally produces dopamine. Now, dopamine, as you sure you know, is the main chemical that is missing in Parkinson's sufferers, and Parkinson's sufferers are given synthetic dopamine. And another time, after giving a talk in Hampshire, somebody gave me the name of a neurologist in the Midlands, and they said, call him up. Well, I don't have any letters after my name. And, you know, as we've discussed, crop circles have a very bad name due to the press. So it took me 2 weeks to be brave enough to summon enough courage to ring this scientist, this neurologist. And eventually I did. I felt very brave one morning, and before the brave feeling wore off, I grabbed the telephone and I got him. I got him immediately. And I started right away. I didn't, on crop circles, I didn't give him time to say anything when I said I'm researching crop circles, and then I boom. And about halfway through, he said, Lucy, this is really very interesting, because he said, we're following exactly the same line of research as you are, because we find that if we raise the Parkinson sufferer's level of brain activity into the gamma stage, it inhibits their dyskinesia, i.e., it stops their shaking. But I knew what was going to follow. He said, I'm very sorry, I can't work with you, Lucy. And I knew he couldn't. He was sponsored by the Wellcome Trust and goodness knows how many others. He would have lost his funding.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, that's you know, a very interesting story on a couple levels. I think that
the press. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Well, it just seems to me it comes down to the same thing, which is that if you choose to ignore the unexplained mysteries in our world, you're sort of limiting your own perspective and I think your own lives. I mean, I think that it bothers me when quote unquote mainstream scientists won't look at the evidence or are afraid to because of the effect on their careers. And I think that, you know, there's a couple quotes from leading scientists on this dilemma, which we don't really need to talk about right now because it goes to the same point. If your career depends upon accepting a certain paradigm, it is a career limiting move to open your mind. But then again, we need people to open their minds to expand our worldview. And luckily, we have people like you out there who are on the case, so to speak. The photographs do not lie. They need to be explained. And I think that the explanation is that there's mysteries in the world that we will never solve. I think that's the mystery. I mean, as you were talking, and looking at these photographs, I was really thinking of snowflakes, because aren't snowflakes similar? They're intricate designs. We're taught when we're young, every snowflake is different. Well, how in the heck does the design of how in the heck are the designs of snowflakes put together? Where do those come from?
And every single one is different.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very similar thing, which is that at the root of our world, there is a artistic design. There was somebody who, I don't know if it was in your book or the research I did, who used the word playful, that the designer or the whatever is creating these crop circles is playful. Well, that to me is a pretty good explanation right there. And it's part of what I would call the enchantment of the world we live in. Now, the one question I want to ask you before we wrap things up here, and I'm curious about, which is, have you ever seen a partially formed crop circle that clearly was not man-made? But have you in your experience, are they always like a artistic whole?
Well, I've never seen a genuine one that is have been partially partially made. No, I haven't. I don't think it's in the nature of the phenomenon, to be perfectly honest. But I think maybe we should have a little talk about some of the healing things, don't you?
Yes. Once you talk about the other examples of positive healing effects.
Because just as you get people feel very ill at times, and I always advise people if they don't feel well to come out right away, there have been some really wonderful healing examples. Mostly they've been temporary, but some of them have been permanent. There was one, many years ago in 2001. It was in Canola, and I took friends into the circle, and I was burying little bottles of water, which I can tell you more about because that was fascinating, inside and outside the circle, and then they're compared and we see the difference. But when I was inside the circle, I was bending down examining things, and other people were bending down, and one of the people said, "Oh, that hurt." She said, I've got a collarbone, a broken collarbone. And I said, "Oh, right." And then as she came out, she felt very, very much better. And she went to her physiotherapist. And it was a different physiotherapist because her usual one was on holiday. And the physiotherapist, this particular one, said, "But you haven't got a broken collarbone." And Colette said, "Oh, I have," she said. I have, but it's feeling much better." And this, the physiotherapist said, "Well, right, let's look at the X-ray." And they looked at the X-ray, and when you break your collarbone, apparently you're left with a little lump afterwards. Well, Colette didn't have any lump, and yet on the X-ray, it showed that she had broken her collarbone. So the evidence was there that originally she did have a broken collarbone, and afterwards she had no vestige of evidence to say she ever had. And then there was another lovely one.
That's an amazing story. Okay, go ahead. I love these stories because anything that heals the human body, that avoids invasive surgery or the cures of some of the cures of medical science, I'm a fan of. So
also have this wonderful feeling of oneness when we go in.
Yeah.
And, we're very reserved people in England.
Yeah.
As I often tell the story, people can go up on the same train, maybe for 25 years, in the same carriage with the same people. And as soon as they get in, they dive behind their Times or their Telegraph paper, and they don't even know. They might sort of give a cursory good morning, and that's it. They don't even know the names of the people who've been sitting there for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And yet, when we go into crop circles, this is this extraordinary feeling of oneness, and we find we're all chatting away, and it's absolutely wonderful. And it doesn't. I mean, it's quite against the norm of English people, but it's one of the really, really beneficial aspects. Another wonderful case was of a friend again who had a skiing accident, and when he was young, and he'd been skiing as a young man and had damaged his neck very badly. He hadn't broken it, but over the years he'd been to doctors, he'd been to specialists, and over the years it got progressively worse to the stage that when this event happened, he could only sleep on one side of his head on a special pillow. Well, this was the year when we had a lot of organic shaped wonderful crop circles, and there was one that was shaped like a hummingbird. And that has many wonderful meanings as to hummingbirds. And anyhow, he went in there, and as he was sitting there, he found that his neck no longer hurt. He couldn't believe it after all the years of increasing pain and discomfort. and the steps he had to try and take to alleviate it. To his absolute amazement, he was fine. And I've been in touch with him regularly since then, and he's still absolutely amazing and absolutely free of pain. So those two are permanent ones, but very often they're just temporary.
Well, I think that this whole area, which I suspect, Lucy, is a very new area of study in terms of the healing or health effects of crop circles, but it really opens a door to the complexity of the mystery, or the multi-level nature of the mystery. In your book, you talk about energy, and in fact, the title of your book is The Energies of Crop Circles. And I don't think there's anybody from any scientific discipline that would disagree with the idea that the physical world is full of energy, is the whole Einstein equation, energy equals mass times the speed of light squared, that matter equals energy at high speeds. The question always is, what is the source of the energy? And that's where the mysteries abound. And if you're saying, and what I would say, if on a speculative jaunt, I would say that if there is an energy to the cosmos, then it's a positive energy. It's got something to do with creation, and crop circles are sort of a unique worldly phenomena that has unique energies, and therefore they do, inject positive energy, force fields, whatever scientific term you want to use, into folks that deal with them. I mean, I could accept that, and I think that's sort of what you're saying. That's the way I would put it. I mean, I just think that it's a very, very interesting thing. It's also something that is positive. It's a favorable interpretation, and I always look at folks that sort of look down their noses at things like crop circles or the paranormal, precognitive dreams, synchronicity, all these things. And I'm thinking, well, if these events are real and they make your life better, then what's the problem? What is the problem? Why would we dismiss these phenomena if they have a positive benefit and they show the richness of the world we live in? So I think it's really a cool thing. I mean, obviously, one thing that's good about your book, another thing, is that you have scientific researchers doing this. You're not just waving your hands and saying, "Oh, look, this person's healed." You point to X-rays and to medical testing.
Yes, indeed, it's essential to go down that avenue if you want to be considered seriously.
Right.
And this is a subject which does need to be taken seriously, and I just wish more people would do that, and I wish I could get more support, because it's all very expensive. I wish I could get more funding and support to continue this, because I think it's of great importance to the medical world and to mankind.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's something which I think cannot be ignored. The interesting thing is, crop circles mean absolutely nothing to some people. They can walk past and they hardly even see them. And they only speak to certain people. I wouldn't be here after 30 years if I didn't really believe that there was something serious going on. And due to my scientific work, I feel that is a very valuable proof that we are dealing with a phenomenon which needs more explanation.
Yeah, well, I'm with you, because I could see the struggle in overcoming the scientific, the mainstream resistance. But as we come to the end of the show, is there anything else you'd like to add? I think you've given your website already.
I have, and yes, thank you for that, Phil. If anybody would like to buy a book, this would help my research. from my website, and also I would be very happy to sign it for them.
Okay, that's really cool. And her book is published by Destiny Books out of Rochester, Vermont, and it's worth it, even just for the color photographs. It's worth it. But there's also a lot of what I would call insightful narrative, both from Lucy and from James Lyons in this book. And I think what makes it unique is it's not just one of these sort of far out expositions of an unexplained phenomena. They really go out of their way to look at the scientific basis for crop circles. So at the end here, I think it comes down to, are crop circles real or fake? Do they unveil a mystery to the world, or are they the product of hacks? We could say the same thing about the universe at large. Is it the product of design, some intelligent mind, or is it a random creation? It seems to me that if you accept the proposition that a mind of some sort is behind creation, it is no large step to conclude that crop circles are just another sign, along with thousands of others, of design and purpose in the universe. This is Philip Camella. This is Conversations Beyond Science and Religion. Thank you, Lucy, for your time, and thank you for listening.
You've been listening to Conversations Beyond Science and Religion, hosted by Philip Camella. To find out more about Philip and his book, The Collapse of Materialism, visit thecollapseofmaterialism.com.